Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we dissect the political drama so you don't have to. Right. Imagine for a moment that you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, about to deliver a budget that's going to absolutely hammer people's wallets, and just before you do it, you play the gender card. Clever distraction or legitimate complaint? But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on the UK Political Insight. Thank you. Well, that's exactly what's happening right now with Rachel Reeves, and Keir Starmer has jumped in to defend her faster than a Labour MP can claim expenses. Let's unpack this absolute masterclass in political timing, shall we? So here's the setup. Rachel Reeves, Britain's first female Chancellor, is about to drop a budget that's rumored to contain more tax hikes than a hiker's boot collection. We're talking major increases, the kind that make your eyes water and your bank account weep. But just before she unveils this Harmanian horror show, she's come out swinging with complaints about mansplaining and criticism. And Keir Starmer, being the supportive boss that he is, has backed her up by suggesting she faces more abuse because she's a woman. The timing here is so convenient, it's practically wearing a watch. Let's start with what actually happened. Starmer was at the G20 summit in South Africa, probably enjoying some sunshine while the rest of us shiver in British autumn, when reporters asked him if the criticism Reeves has been getting is sexist. Now, he could have given a simple yes or no answer, but this is politics, so obviously nothing's that straightforward. Instead, he launched into a whole speech about how women in public life get much more criticism and abuse than men. Not just in politics, mind you, but across multiple areas, including the media. It's a sweeping statement, delivered with the confidence of someone who definitely wasn't going to let a little thing like nuance get in the way. Starmer went full protective mode, saying he's acutely aware that women get much more abuse and criticism than men do, and it's about time we acknowledge that. Fair enough, there's plenty of evidence that female politicians do face horrific abuse online and in public. But here's the thing that's got everyone's eyebrows raised higher than Boris Johnson's approval rating after Partygate. This passionate defense comes right as Reeves is about to deliver a budget that's going to be about as popular as a vegan option at a steakhouse. Coincidence? Maybe. Strategic? Absolutely. The Prime Minister didn't stop there, though. Oh no, he went on to sing Reeves' praises like she's the second coming of economic genius. He's really proud, apparently, that they've got a female chancellor who's doing a really good job. Then he rattled off some statistics that sound impressive until you actually think about them for more than 5 seconds. 5 million extra NHS appointments, he said. They promised 2 million before the election and delivered 5 million. Sounds fantastic, right? Except when you remember that NHS waiting lists are still longer than a queue for Glastonbury tickets, and millions are still waiting for treatment. But sure, let's focus on the appointments number and ignore the bit where people are still suffering. Then Starmer mentioned 5 interest rate cuts, which is interesting because interest rates are set by the Bank of England, not the government. That's like me taking credit for the weather being nice because I happened to go outside when the sun came out. The Bank of England is independent for a reason, specifically so politicians can't meddle with monetary policy for political gain. But here's Starmer, essentially claiming credit for something his government didn't actually do. Bold move, that. And then there's the wages claim. Wages have gone up more in the first 16 months of this government than in the first 10 years of the last one, apparently. That sounds brilliant until you remember we've had crushing inflation, a cost of living crisis, and that wage growth means nothing if prices are rising faster. Real wage growth, the kind that actually matters because it accounts for inflation, tells a different story. But why let pesky economic reality get in the way of a good soundbite? Now let's talk about Rachel Reeves herself because she's been making her own headlines. In an interview with the Times magazine, she acknowledged she's got a target on her back. The media's going for her all the time, she says, and it's exhausting. But she's not going to let them bring her down by undermining her character or confidence. She's seen off a lot of those boys before, and she'll continue to do so. It's fighting talk, the kind of defiant stance that plays well with supporters who see a woman standing up to criticism. But it's also conveniently timed right before she's about to make herself even more unpopular by hiking taxes. Here's where this gets really interesting. Is the criticism of Reeves sexist? Some of it almost certainly is. female politicians face disgusting abuse that their male counterparts rarely experience. The misogyny in British politics is real and well documented. But is all criticism of Reeves sexist? Absolutely not. And here's the problem with what's happening right now. By leading with the sexism angle right before an unpopular budget, there's a risk of conflating legitimate policy criticism with sexist abuse. And that's dangerous because it shuts down debate. Think about it like this. If you criticize Reeves's economic policies, her tax plans, or her handling of public finances, you might now be painted as part of the sexist mob going after her because she's a woman. It's a shield against criticism, intentional or not, and it muddies the waters between genuine misogyny that should be called out and proper scrutiny of government policy that's literally what opposition and media are supposed to do. You can acknowledge that female politicians face extra abuse while also holding them accountable for their decisions. These things aren't mutually exclusive. The mansplaining complaint is particularly interesting. Reeves has specifically called out mansplaining, which is absolutely a real phenomenon where men condescendingly explain things to women as if they're incapable of understanding. But when you're the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the most powerful positions in government, and you're complaining about mansplaining while people are criticizing your economic policies, it starts to feel a bit like deflection. Economic criticism isn't mansplaining just because it's coming from men. It's scrutiny, which every chancellor faces regardless of gender. Ask George Osborne or Philip Hammond if they got an easy ride. Spoiler alert, they didn't. And let's address the elephant in the room, which is that budget everyone's dreading. Reeves is expected to unveil major tax hikes to fill what she's calling a huge gap in spending plans. Now, governments need money to function. That's not controversial. Taxes are part of life, death and taxes and all that. But the timing of this gender discrimination narrative right before announcing unpopular tax rises is so politically calculated it's practically wearing a watch. It's setting up a framework where criticism of the budget can be dismissed as sexist rather than engaged with on its merits. It's the kind of political maneuvering that makes people cynical about politicians, not because standing up against sexism is wrong, it's absolutely right, but because weaponizing real issues as political shields damages the cause. When genuine discrimination gets mixed up with strategic deflection, it makes it harder to address the actual sexism that exists. The boy who cried wolf had a point. If you invoke serious issues for political convenience, people stop taking those issues seriously. And that hurts everyone, especially the women who face real discrimination and abuse. Starmer's defense of Reeves might be well-intentioned, but it's also politically convenient. He gets to look like a progressive champion of women's rights while simultaneously providing cover for what's likely to be a deeply unpopular budget. It's a two-for-one special in political positioning. Meanwhile, Reeves gets to frame herself as a brave woman standing up to the boys' club rather than a chancellor about to make unpopular decisions that will affect millions of people's finances. The media criticism angle is worth examining too. Yes, female politicians often face harsher media scrutiny and more personal attacks than male counterparts. Studies have shown this repeatedly. But the media also has a job to do, which is holding power to account. When the Chancellor is about to announce significant changes to taxation that will affect every person in this country, the media should be scrutinizing those plans intensely. That's not sexism, that's journalism. The problem is distinguishing between legitimate scrutiny and sexist attacks, and right now there seems to be an attempt to blur those lines. What's particularly frustrating about this whole situation is that it undermines the legitimate conversation we should be having about women in politics and the abuse they face. There should be zero tolerance for the misogynistic attacks that female MPs receive daily. The death threats, the sexual harassment, the vile comments about their appearance or personal lives, all of it is unacceptable and needs to be stamped out. But that important conversation gets derailed when it's mixed up with budget politics and economic policy criticism. It's like trying to have a serious discussion about fire safety while someone's using the fire alarm to distract from burning dinner. The 5 million appointments boast deserves another look because it's such a perfect example of political spin. Yes, more appointments is good. But what about outcomes? How many of those appointments led to treatment? How many people are still on waiting lists? How long are people waiting between appointments?
The NHS isn't measured by how many appointments happen, it's measured by whether people actually get better. It's like a restaurant bragging about how many tables they've seated while ignoring that half the customers left without eating because the service was so slow. And the interest rate celebration is just bizarre. The Bank of England cut rates because economic conditions warranted it, not because Labour asked nicely. Claiming credit for independent central bank decisions is either economic illiteracy or political opportunism. Neither is a great look for a prime minister, but here we are. So what we've got is a perfectly orchestrated political play. Female Chancellor, about to deliver an unpopular budget, gets ahead of criticism by highlighting sexism she faces. Prime Minister backs her up with a passionate defense of women in politics. Media coverage now has to navigate the minefield of distinguishing between legitimate criticism and sexist attacks. Critics of the budget risk being labeled misogynist